and welcome to Frankly Speaking with Frank Portinari, the podcast that gains access to real and inspiring people. Today, we welcome Alan Stevens, more formally known as the Media Coach. I'd just like to make a few announcements, as we normally do. I'd like to welcome our sponsors, Sheet Roofing Limited, who are specialists in all aspects of roofing and asphalt works. From residential to large commercial properties, all work is covered with insurance-backed guarantees. Sheet Roofing Limited are a family company with over 50 years experience. Sincere thanks to all those who continue to follow Frankly Speaking. It really is appreciated. We appreciate your likes, your comments. Obviously, we would like some additional subscribers if that's possible. I'd also like to mention the Alzheimer's Society, which, if you see, I'm currently wearing a T-shirt, and myself and my good lady will be taking part in the walk on the 26th of September at Stratford, and sometime just prior to that, I shall put something up, and maybe if people would like to make a donation, it would be very much appreciated. We've also previously mentioned the Change Your Life, Put Down Your Knife campaign. We've had Ben Spann on as a guest, and as we did promise him that whether he won or lost his fight, we would make a donation, and we've honoured that donation, and he's thanked us for that. I'd also like to thank Matt the Hat Media for all his technical support and advice. But the main man today is Alan Stevens. So, Alan, I'd like to welcome you along to Frankly Speaking.
Thank you, Frank. It's a pleasure to be here.
Lovely, thank you. Well, I'm still going to have to refer to my notes, Alan, because you have quite a CV, and please add to that as we're having the conversation. You've basically an author of several books, which I happen to have one of them here, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading.
My ladies, that's good.
You and your colleague.
Thank you.
I think I've learned a lot from that. Keeps the draft from under the door.
Props up tables. Yes, all sorts. Yeah.
It's a very good book, Alan, and I really enjoy reading it, and I'm sure many others have as well. Now, you've been a past president of the Global Speakers Federation. Mm-hmm. You're a fellow and past president of the UK and Ireland Professional Speakers Association. You've done numerous charities, charitable works, voluntary work. You fancy yourself as a bit of a comedian, I understand.
Now and again.
At comedy clubs.
Yeah.
So basically, a very real and inspiring person, and that's clearly what we want on Frankly Speaking. And so what I'd like to do, Alan, is I'd like to start at the beginning, as they say, and I certainly know where you've landed up, or pretty much where you've landed up so far, but where you grew up and some of your background, I'm sure would interest some of the viewers.
Well, thank you, Frank. I mean, I am, and I know you are, but I like to describe myself as a genuine geezer, a 10th generation Londoner at the very least, as far as my research goes. Grew up in Putney, Fulham and Hammersmith. So, originally born in Putney, and grew up in and around the river. Very, always very keen on the river, of course, as we all are. But I spent most of my youth, what misspent part of it there was. I'm quite old because it was like the 60s and 70s when I was growing up. In and around a lot of the music clubs, actually, but also around Hammersmith Palais, Fulham Palace Road, that sort of area. So I'm a West Londoner by birth, but I've lived all over. I live in the East now, I live in the East of London now. But my background is very much rooted in London, and a lot of it around music, actually. I used to do a lot of work. My grandfather used to run a music club in Southwest London, and I got to meet a lot of the bands and the artists in the 60s, and I've been very fortunate indeed in that aspect, and I've carried it on.
Would we know some of those, Alan? Would you be able to?
There's a popular band called the Rolling Stones, who I once introduced on stage in the mid-60s, and the Kinks, the small faces they were in them days.
Mm.
And in fact, David Bowie. I introduced David Bowie on stage on the first night of the Ziggy Stardust tour at our pub, the Toby Jug Jazz and Blues Club in Southwest London. So I've met a few of these. I've met a few of them. They're all lovely people. They were all lovely people.
Yeah. So did you prior to that? What was your education? What sort of background did you have siblings?
Yeah, I've got a brother Colin, who's still around. Bless him. He's just recovered from cancer, so I'd give him a shout out. He's doing well now. He's a year out, so bless him. He's fine. Yeah, we so we grew up, say, in Southwest London. When it was your standard infant school and primary school. I ended up getting a scholarship to Kingston Grammar School, which is a direct grant grammar school, and that was an interesting one because it was. We didn't have. My father had died when I was young. We didn't have a lot of money. I got a scholarship. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship there, and it was nearly all fee-paying pupils. Right. So I didn't really fit in because I used to get free dinner. You know, a lot of kids these days get free dinners. Very few back in the 60s got free dinners. And all of my school life, I was on a special table with two other boys that had a little notice that said free dinner boys here. Wasn't allowed to mix with the people who were paying and the people who were paying fees for the school and so on. And that, actually, I've got to say, turned me into a bit of a socialist, to be perfectly honest. I wasn't too impressed with the privilege that others were afforded. You know?
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And what sort of qualifications, or did you go on to further?
Yeah, I did. I did okay. I wanted to be a scientist, actually. And back in the day, I studied biology, and I ended up at East Anglia University, where I did a degree in ecology, and that was back in the early 70s. I helped to co-found a body called Friends of the Earth back in 1971, and we started off doing stunts to generate some publicity.
Yeah.
Went and did a master's and ended up, of all things, teaching, which I didn't really do too well at for about 4 years. I loved the teaching, but I hated the staff. So it didn't really work.
Was it one particular subject, or did you have to do a variety of subjects?
Funny enough, the first year I ended up teaching maths, which I'm not particularly strong on, because I went for a job and they said, we haven't got a job that would suit you. Would you like to be a maths teacher? And I spent 6 weeks trying to learn this maths, the Scottish maths project. I was terrible, and I left after a year. And then I went and did 4 years teaching biology, and I thought, I'm no good at this. So I'm no good at this at all. So I kind of went back to journalism, which was what I'd always done at uni, and where I used to be involved in the radio station and the TV station. And I went to work for a Which magazine as a sort of technical journalist, consumer journalist, and that's I just kind of went on from there.
So it wasn't necessarily something you'd aspired to do. It's something you picked up along as you went along.
Yeah, something I found I was quite good at. I found I was quite good at delivering a message, sort of being on TV and radio, a bit like we are now. Talking to a screen, talking to a microphone, and I quite enjoyed it. I enjoyed the investigative journalism part of it as well. Yeah. Going undercover, into restaurants and garages and pretending to be a punter and finding out dodgy garages and all sorts of things. None of your friends, I'm sure you wouldn't have known any of these people, but there were some people who were quite dodgy in back in the day.
Very coy at this point.
They were doing the old cut and shut thing and that sort of thing. And I used to go in and I had a hidden camera in a bag, which was quite scary sometimes, and a recorder, and we used to do reports on all sorts of services, and it was interesting because if I'd have got caught doing some of these things, I could have been in serious trouble by some of these people, but never got caught.
So, at what stage did you decide that you could do this independently, if you like, as opposed to working for an employer or an agency? Well,
that's an interesting one, and it was back in the 90s. I was doing some work on Sky TV, so I was doing a show on Sky TV with a guy called Will Hanrahan and Chris Long, a thing called The Buyer's Guide. And so I'd met a lot of kind of TV guys, and so I was very familiar with the world of TV. And then we had a website, so it was a very early website that was selling some software, and I was in charge of it. I was in charge of all the digital services at Which magazine, and we got hacked into. So somebody hacked us on a Friday night. I got a phone call from the Sunday Times on the Saturday to say, is that Alan Stevens? I said, it is. And they said, you're in charge of the digital services at which magazine? I said, I am. They said, your website's been hacked into. You've got 2,000 credit card names and numbers exposed on the web. And this was back in the day. It was like, this was 96, 97. What are you going to do about it? And I thought, oh, bad words, you know. Sorry, I nearly said a bad word then, but you can imagine.
I'm sure we've had far worse on it,
you know, shizzle, I thought. So I had to do something about it. And what I did an interview, and then on the Monday of that weekend, I ended up doing 27 interviews on TV, radio, and so on, trying to explain what had happened and what we were going to do about it. It was absolutely exhausting. And then fast forward a month, and somebody said they'd been on a media training course, and somebody said to me, they said, Al, do you know they're using your videos as media training videos? Like they're showing people how to do it. And he said, I've been to this media training company somewhere in North London, and they kept showing your videos. I said, that's really? Anyway, I looked into it, and I found out there were lots of PR companies were using my videos of that incident on the Monday as an example of how to cope with a crisis in the media. I thought, hang on, I'm clearly not too bad at this. So within
excuse me, and presumably they were making some sort of financial gain from this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. They were training companies, and they were using my material that they'd recorded off the telly to train people with. So I thought I should do that. So I did. I packed up my job in '98, started my own company, Media Coach, which you kindly mentioned, and I've been doing that ever since. Media training, crisis media, and a little bit of professional speaking as well, and a bit of comedy.
A little bit. I will challenge that. I'm sorry.
Classic British understatement, that was.
So when does your involvement come with the PSA?
The Professional Speaking Association. I mean, really in the very early days. It's the organisation was founded in 1999. I got involved in early 2000, so in the very early days. Got involved, and it was weird because I went to there's a pub in Marylebone called the Cricketers. I don't know if anybody knows it, but it's a nice pub, and the association was having an extraordinary general meeting, an EGM. I didn't really know what it was, but I thought, well, I'll go along. And I turned up, and the board were all there, and I was the only person who wasn't on the board who turned up. I was the only ordinary member who turned up. And they said to me, "Oh, it's nice of you to come along." And so we had a vote, whatever it was. I can't remember what it was now. I went to have a drink upstairs, and then somebody came up and called me down, and they said, "Would you come down and talk to the board?" And I said, "Fine." They said, "We've just co-opted you onto the board." I said, "You can't do that." And he said, "No, yeah, we've had a vote." And lo and behold, I was on the board, and I was on the board for 15 years.
It sounds very similar to an episode of Fools and Horses, where isn't it where Rodney or Dave suddenly becomes the chairman, doesn't he? Or secretary?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it was just like that. It was like all of a sudden I was having one minute I was having a drink, next minute I'm on the board. It was just the most bizarre thing. But you know,
that was your introduction to
that was my introduction. Within 6 years, I was president of the association, the National Association of UK and Ireland, and then
how much drinking did you do?
How much? Yeah, a lot. How much drinking?
Yeah.
A whole lot.
You seem to be getting a lot of promotion here.
Yeah, within 3 years, I was president of the world, president of the Global Speakers Federation, which you've mentioned earlier on, and that was a great experience. It was a terrific experience. It really was, and traveled around the world and spoke in no end of countries and had a reasonably good time.
Yeah. What other people have you met in those countries, in those other countries?
Oh, any number of people. I mean, it's very fortunate when you're in the business that I'm in. You know, you end up at lots of events and you do lots of gigs and you meet people that you wouldn't otherwise meet. So I met a lot of sporting people. You know, I became friends with Boyks, Jeff Boycott. Did a couple of gigs with him. Worked with Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair's spin doctor. Did some gigs with George Best, and that was really interesting. And he was a lovely man, absolutely wonderful man. And it was interesting because on one occasion, within an hour, both Boycott and Best asked me for my advice. And I thought, well, that's amazing. How did that happen? And what it was that they'd seen me on television. It was at Sky News. They were both at Sky, and they'd seen me they were in a green room, and they both asking me advice about technology. And when I got the car back to my office in Marylebone, Dave, who was my driver, we were chatting away, and I said, I said, Dave, you won't believe this, but just Boycott and Best have both asked me for my advice in the last hour. And he didn't bat an eyelid. He just kept looking at the road and he said, that's because you're an expert, Al. I thought, I suppose I am. Yeah, because you don't realise, do you? You don't realise that that you know stuff until somebody tells you that.
Actually points it out. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realise that. I mean, you're an expert in a lot of things. I know you are, because I know you're quite well by now. And you know an awful lot about an awful lot of things. And it's only when somebody points it out to you that you realise it.
This is the point where we reveal we've met.
Oh, sorry.
I was trying to con people, make out it was all research.
I've never seen him before in my life, officer. Honestly, no, I've never seen him before. Oh, that Frank? No, don't know.
I'll come clean now. Me and Alan are very good friends.
Yeah,
very good friends. Thanks to Alan. I'm also a member of the Professional Speaker Association,
and a very good speaker too.
I'm very grateful as well. Very grateful because he's introduced me to some very interesting people and inspiring people. So, and I hope to continue and learn more from them. And I do know you're a member of the Frontier Club, which, if you could explain to the viewers what that is.
That's a press club out in West London where people who've been involved. This is the one you're talking about. The people who've been involved in the front line, I suppose. Where people have actually been in war zones and people. I mean, I've never reported from a war zone. I mean, I've worked in Iran and I've worked in Iraq and I've worked in some of those places, but I couldn't actually say I've seen action. It wouldn't be fair of me to say that, but many people have, and a result of that, there's a group of people that have kind of got together to share experiences, and I think it's quite humbling actually to hear people's experiences, to hear what they do, because I mean there have been some extraordinarily courageous people, and this is one thing that gets me, Frank, if you don't mind me having a little bit of a rant.
Carry on.
Because I hear a lot of people complain about reporters and journalists, and they say, oh, they're all running an agenda and they're all telling us lies and so on. And actually, they are some of the bravest people you could ever meet. Some of these people that people like Jeremy Bowen and so on, that they're out there in war zones. Lisa Doucette, and when you meet and talk to these people, it is absolutely humbling, because they put themselves in extreme danger in order to just bring us information, and you've got to take your hat off to that.
Well, where would you say has been the most of a culture shock, the country that you've been to?
I would say, of all the countries I've been to, I would say probably Iran was the biggest culture shock in a whole number of different ways. I mean, I was invited to speak in Iran probably first time about 11, 12 years ago. I was a little bit wary, as you can imagine, because obviously, back in the day when there was the Shah and it was all kind of westernized and so on, and then the Ayatollah took over, and you think, is it all right to go to a place like that? But a couple of my mates were going, and the person who booked us said it'll be fine. It was fine in the end, but it's a very beautiful country. I mean, that was one thing that struck me about it. Tehran itself is a city surrounded by mountain ranges on every side. So the planes kind of drop in very sharply. It's quite a male-dominated society as well, at least so I thought. And then I got myself in front of an audience. I was speaking at several large conferences, and the audience was managers of organizations and so on, and they were more than half women. Oh. I mean, they wear headscarves. They don't wear the full niqab or anything like that, but they wear headscarves. So you're in a different country, and they're quite modest in their dress and so on. But a lot of women in business, and I found that quite surprising, because the impression that you get is that it's a bit like the Taliban or something like that, and it isn't.
Yeah, I probably would have thought the same thing.
It's a very open country. Of course, when you go out, there is separation between the men and the women. And we got taken to a kind of hotel spa place, and there was a separate hotel and spa 2 miles away for the women. So one was only, the men could go to one place and the women would go to another place, and then we'd meet up for dinner afterwards. So there is that. But I mean, we got taken to one of the things they wanted to take us to was the local museum. So they took us to the Iran War Museum. And this was supposed to be a big thing, and it was supposed to be great. And it was an outdoor museum. And when we got there, it was basically heaps of twisted metal on pedestals, like a field full of them. And I said, what are these? And they said, well, they're Iraqi jets that were shot down in the Iran-Iraq war. And they had about 50 of these things. And basically what they'd done, they'd taken the wreckage and they'd stuck it all together and they'd mounted it on these pedestals and put a plaque about where it was shot down. And that was the museum.
That was their version of the Imperial War Museum.
Yeah, and I had to say, well, that's not really very impressive. I tell you, you've seen one plane crash, so to forgive me for being so flippant about it, because obviously people were killed. But, you've seen one hit with twisted metal and there was no body parts or anything like that. It was just the metal. Yeah. But it was completely and utterly bizarre. But then the weirdest thing of all, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm allowed to say things on your podcast that are a little bit risky.
Frankly speaking.
Okay. Right. So right at the end of the time that we were there, the first time we were there, we went to this guy's flat for sort of end of event party. There's nothing too rude coming up, don't worry. End of event party. And of course alcohol is banned, right? You can't buy alcohol. It's a dry country. And we got to his phone, and he opened this enormous double-fronted steel fridge. And I've never seen so much booze, Frank. I've never been in a pub that's got as much booze in it as that guy's fridge. It was just stacked full of it. But that wasn't the half of it, because about 10 minutes later, there's a knock on the door, and there's about half a dozen of the women that have been at the conference, and they're still in their headscarves and their modest dress and so on. And they come in, and we thought, oh, okay, well, they're coming in, they're just going to chat and have a drink or two with us, and they disappeared off into a bedroom. And when they came out, I got to tell you, it was like we were in Las Vegas, and we were seeing one of those shows, with the women up on stage and the headdresses. And I've never seen such a difference between public and private, and that's the thing that stuck with me: the fact that there's a huge difference between what people do in private, certainly in that country and some other countries that I've been to as well in the Middle East, and what's done in public. And it's complete schizophrenia, the whole thing.
I think myself and Gary, i.e. McNahat Media, I remember we went to Croatia. Well, it was Yugoslavia then, basically. It's Croatia now. And we went to Split, and Tottenham were playing Hajduk Split.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And of course, it was still very much a communist country, to the degree they'd walk around in military uniform and they'd have the red star on the front of the hat and so on. And I don't think we've ever been so rich. And I think at the time we could only take about £30 into the country. I know there was a limit at the time. It was in the 80s. There was a limit, and I think it was about 20 pence a bottle of beer. Or it was just a complete shock. And when we went to the local market, it was so poor. You had a stall that just sold nuts. You had a stall that sold oranges, and there were blokes standing around in trilbies and raincoats. Clearly security. And we tried to make light of it and sort of say, KGB, CIA, I was messing about. But we had to be careful. You had to be careful. Yeah, but I've never seen, I think that was our first experience of a degree of poverty. And we stayed in a hotel. Oh, we got into a nightclub for 50 pence. 50 pence. We went at the top of the range hotel.
One of the expensive ones, yeah.
A big meal was something ridiculous. And when we came out of the hotel in the morning and went to get a cab, we realised that the paving stones around the hotel only went so far.
Oh.
And it was just dirt. They literally put enough paving stones for a cab to pull up. You get out and walk on and go in the entrance. And that was it. So that was quite a culture shock. But as I say, we never felt so rich because we had all this money.
It's extraordinary. I mean, I had a similar experience to that in Cuba. We were in Cuba a few years ago. And a massive difference between the haves and the have-nots. They're, again, communist country. Not that I'm making a political point, but that's just how it is. Yeah. But funny enough, the happiest country I've been to, I've never met happier people than I met in Cuba. We did a complete tour of Cuba from Havana to the far end, Holguin as it's called, and drove back along the. And here's a tip: never drive in Cuba. Never drive in Cuba for two reasons. One is the motorways have got potholes in, you could lose your car in, so that is not good. And the other is they're crisscrossed by horse carts, so you can be doing about 60 on the trying to avoid the potholes, and then a horse and cart comes slowly across the road in front of you. It's not a good idea to drive in Cuba.
I don't think I'd go to Cuba because my wife is very fond of Bacardi. So she might overdo it slightly.
Well, there's some very nice bars, including the one that Hemingway used to drink in. It's got a statue of Hemingway at the bar, sitting there with a martini. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful country, but again, extraordinary difference between one and another. And I think that's the thing I've seen a lot more as I've gone around the world. Here, most people are okay. Not everybody, but most people are kind of getting along, and we're okay. But in many countries, there are huge extremes between people who have and people who don't, and that's really what affects you, I think.
Yeah, I'm assuming you've been to America, Alan.
Many times, many times.
And many states. Did you travel quite extensively?
Yeah, I have. I've been all over and spoken in lots of those places. I tend to prefer, I have to say, the fringes, the West and the East. The Los Angeles and the San Frans on one side, the New York, Chicago on the other side. But I've been in the Midwest. I've been to various places. My favorite place of all in America is Austin in Texas, which is, and they have a sign as you drive into Austin. It says "Keep Austin Weird," and it is. It's a weird place. A lot of musicians live there. A lot of new agey type people live there, and there's a band playing in every bar, and there are a lot of bars. It's a fine place.
Yeah, that'd do it for me. That'd suit me.
It would. You'd love it.
Yeah, that'd suit me. So business-wise, you're clearly a successful businessman, and you have staff. How has Brexit affected you recently?
Well, it's an interesting point. I mean, I've got clients in the EU, what's now the EU over there. We're not there anymore. But and I'm not going to say for or against Brexit. It doesn't really matter. It's happened now, so we've got to deal with it. But the one regret to me has been that with my clients in France and Italy and Germany and Spain and so on, it's now much more difficult for me to take my British staff over there for reasons of visas and work permits and how long can they stay and all that kind of thing. Obviously, we're not traveling much at the moment, but when we get back to it. So in order to guarantee that I can provide a service, I've had to employ or bring in people who live there. So, French technicians or German technicians. And that is a direct result of Brexit, which is a regret. It's not a disaster because somebody's getting the business, but it's a shame. That's all. And I think for me, the kind of the downside, I mean, there are lots of upsides of it, obviously, but the downside of it is the more difficulty I have working with people outside the UK, certainly in the European Union. But hey, it's not a big thing. It's not the end of the world.
Are you comfortable speaking like this via Zoom and similar? Oh,
very much so. Very much so, yeah. As I run a large Facebook group called Remote Speaking, where we give people advice on how to deliver. I've been doing it for years and years. I think 25 years was the first time I actually delivered remotely to an audience. So I am absolutely across it, very familiar with it. I prefer to be in front of I prefer to be face to face. I think we all do. You prefer to be in a room with somebody rather than talking to somebody on a screen. But I think what's happened over the last couple of years to us, we've kind of got used to this. And I think some people have seen the benefits. For people who are remote, who just can't get to some venue, then it's a benefit to them. For people who are too scared to travel, then it's a benefit to them. And I think, if I used to go and do a gig, let's say I was doing a gig in Germany, Frankfurt or somewhere like that, that was 3 days out of my life.
Yeah.
Because I'd have to be on a plane the first day, I'd have to get there the night before, do the gig, and then I'd probably stay overnight. And now, in fact, I'm speaking in Frankfurt this week, on Thursday this week, and I'll be done and dusted, and I'll be out in the kitchen with a beer 10 minutes after I finish the gig. So it's a different thing, isn't it?
I did find it difficult because I'd had no experience. So let's just sort of stress that. So going to PSA meetings, and I think, God, was it 2? I'd been to 2 before it suddenly got stopped. So my next contact with fellow PSA members came via Zoom. And I found that very, very difficult. Just sitting, talking to an inanimate object. I did struggle. There's no doubt about that. I found that quite difficult. But by the same token, it did give me access to so many people. So when it came to the showcases, I obviously met people from probably up to now probably half a dozen different regions. That I probably would never met unless they had come as a guest to London, or for some reason we'd gone there, or there was a big conference somewhere. So in that sense, that worked. That works.
I think there is that great advantage, and I think people have found that they can work it into their lifestyle. And I think what's going to happen, a lot of people are going to do some and some. They're going to do some face to face, they're going to do some remote, and they're going to make it work for them. So I think the era of lots of people going to office workers, for example. I mean, some people have to go where they work because it's a physical job, and you've got to be where the action is. But I think for maybe 50, 60% of people that will go to an office and sit and do some work, they could equally well do that from home, and they could probably do it just as effectively, if not more effectively. I think the real dilemma is going to be for employers who are trying to figure out how to pay people. Because if people can get the work done in 3 hours, they would normally take 7 hours to do in an office, the company's going to say, well, should we pay them for half a day? But they're doing the same amount of work as they would have done if they were here. How do we justify that to the staff?
I can see that.
It's going to be a real dilemma for a lot.
I do. A negative I do see is, personally, I would prefer the interaction with an audience. I mean, I suppose if I do this and there is some sort of talk and there is an audience, maybe I'll have a better experience of that. But personally, I prefer to look into people's eyes. I like to read their body language and get a response. And as you talk very well, you don't talk to an audience. You talk to people as if they're individuals. That's right. So I miss that. I've had some experience that recently, which has been a good learning curve, and I've been taking part in a bus tour.
Oh yeah, that's right. I must come on that with you.
And I've quite enjoyed that because it's clearly a live audience.
Yeah,
they are lively, and and it's good, and it's not heckling. I wouldn't call it heckling, but people can be quite vocal, and it's good because you have to ad lib. And you have to sort of
great training
and say something.
Yeah,
and it's only undercut the time. It's not being negative. It's just someone being funny, being amusing, etc.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's been good practice, and
that is good.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So in that sense, I hope that we do still retain some live audiences.
Oh, we have to. I mean, two things that I'm involved in: music and comedy. Those two things, they don't work online for me.
No.
I mean, you can have a musician who will play in their home studio and you can watch it, but it's not the same as being in an audience and actually, being there and feeling the music. If you're in a concert and you feel it in your gut. I mean, that you can't reproduce that. And the other thing is, comedy for me just doesn't work online. I've done comedy gigs online. I've been to comedy gigs online, and it doesn't, because you can't get the feel for it. There's like you on your bus. You get the feel for the people that are sitting there, I bet. And you meet some characters, and you start picking somebody off, and you might have a little bit of fun with somebody, and somebody else will call something out. You can't do that online.
Well, you can see who's genuinely. I've noticed that you can see who's genuinely interested.
Yeah.
The person looking over the top deck of the bus, could possibly be listening. But not like the person who's actually facing you and you can see are actually engaged in what you're talking about. But still, as I say, I still also see, well, look, this situation now, if someone had said to me, one day that I would, hosted a podcast, I'd have laughed.
And you're doing a fine job of it. I say so. I've listened to your podcasts, and if anybody's not listened to all your podcasts, they really should, because they've been great.
Oh, lovely. No, I appreciate it. I think at the beginning, the early ones, it took a little bit of getting used to. I hasten to add, it wasn't Mac the Hat Media involved at the time. No. Clearly, I knew there'd be some teething problems. And it was a shame because we had some very, very good guests. Thankfully, we've added to that, and the technology has got a bit better, and hopefully we'll improve upon it, some more. But yeah, we've had some fascinating guests. It started to find its own niche now, and we've had a good range of guests, very interesting guests. And clearly, we say we want real and inspiring people, and they've certainly been that. And we want to give access to people that wouldn't necessarily get access to social media or the general public. And I've learned quite a lot. I've learned quite a lot from people, and I'm not suggesting we wouldn't like, some famous people, as long as they've got a message.
Yeah,
but
sure.
We've dealt with soldiers. We've spoken to soldiers, battle-hardened soldiers. Someone who's been wrongly imprisoned. We've spoken to people who've been sexually abused. People that have suffered from, through alcohol abuse, gambling abuse, and so on. And also gives us an opportunity to advertise anybody's, charities.
Of course, yeah.
So from being so apprehensive, I'm finding it very, very enjoyable at the moment. And as I say, it's strange because it's basically come via yourself, Alan, in that sense, and that's why I like to use the word inspiring. Because, as you know, when we first met, a book, my book became an introduction.
Great book.
And we then, we met, and you introduced me to the PSA, which I'm very grateful for. And in turn, this is a good training ground for that as well, and even the bus tour.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm actually doing a couple of talks up in Scotland next month, which will add to that, that experience.
Yeah.
So what I was going to ask you, Alan, is what are your? And I kind of know the answer. I'll ask what you're currently doing before I get to the big question.
Okay. What I'm currently doing is I'm actually working with a lot of virtual clients, as you might expect. So I do quite a bit of speaker coaching. So for people who are in the profession, also for corporates, and I do some one-to-one work. I'm just launching a group coaching program for people who want to improve their speaking. That will be coming out in October. And I'm also working online and just starting to work offline, just starting to get back in a room with people doing what I used to do, which is crisis media training and media training. So keeping myself pretty busy, I have to say, doing what I do, and I've been doing it that long that I'm getting the hang of it. And people are starting to pick up on things. And the lovely thing is when people come back to you after a long time and they say, "Look, we worked 15 years ago, we worked together. I need you again," because with the crisis stuff, it tends to be very immediate. So somebody will give me a phone call. I'm on call 24/7, so somebody can phone me anytime and say, "Look, Alan, we've got a problem here in India, or something's gone wrong in Canada. What do we say? What do we say?" And that I love that, because I love that kind of immediacy. Yeah.
I know last year, going back a couple of years when we first met, and I know you had some, yourself and some colleagues had some, very big plans, and then of course, COVID interfered.
Exactly.
With that situation, and that must have been very frustrating. But I understand that you've been quite successful now.
Things are coming together. Yeah, I mean, and I've got. In fact, funny enough, I was talking to a colleague in America earlier today, and a colleague in Ireland, and we're putting together some quite exciting stuff, mostly online, at least at the moment. And another thing, I'm doing a lot of work, which a little bit about this. And perhaps I'm anticipating a question of yours, and that's something that I'm going to be doing next year, which I'm in charge of, which I'm very, very excited about.
Which
I'll tell you what I'll tell you what it is, shall I? see, that was a media technique I used right
Yeah,
there.
all right, okay, I see.
Yeah. Something very exciting coming up next year. You've got, and what is that, Alan? Well, I'll tell you, since you've asked me. It's something called the Global Speakers Summit. It's a bit like the Olympics. It comes around every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And it involves people from all over the world. And I made a successful bid 5 years ago to hold it for the first time in Great Britain and Ireland. And in fact, we've decided to hold it in Dublin.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why. I don't think there's any adult beverages in Dublin. I'm not entirely sure about that.
No drinking.
I believe there may be. So we've hired a place called Croke Park, which is the home of Irish sport, Gaelic football and hurling. We're using their conference facilities, and we're going to be inviting speakers from all over the world, including your good self, Frank, to come and join us and tell their stories for a few days in October. In Dublin next year. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a massive global event, and I think it'll be. And the theme of it is welcome home, because we're finally coming back together as a kind of family, as a group, and it's welcome home to actually being in the room with people. It's going to be great.
Well, I certainly appreciate that invitation, and I know you kind of intimated it, a while back, which I appreciate was difficult. We'd only just met, but you did make me feel very welcome and confident. I would say you was confident in what you thought I was capable of doing.
Yeah.
And now you've extended that invitation. I appreciate it even more, and I have to say I'm thoroughly looking forward to it.
It'll be wonderful. I mean, it gives you the chance to get in front of a global audience.
Yeah,
which is going to be fantastic for all of us. It really is. And
do you know what period it's over, and without getting into too much?
Yes, detail? I do. It's going to be at the end of September, 30th of September to the 2nd of October next year. There might be a little bit of a social program around the outside. It's entirely possible. So we'll talk about that at some point.
My area of expertise.
There'll be a visit. What's known as Johnny Fox's. We'll be definitely in a place called Johnny Fox's.
Oh, okay. I'm sure I should acclimatise myself.
Oh, you'll need to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Alan, I've got to say it's been great talking to you.
Pleasure. A real pleasure.
Unless there's anything else you'd like to mention, then.
Not really. No, not really. I mean, obviously, if anybody wants to find out what I do, just come to Media Coach. Look for the Media Coach online. You'll find me. Or Media Coach Co UK is my website.
I'm sure Mac the Hat will put some details up.
Bless him for that. And I have to say, it's been technically brilliant. This whole event. There's nothing gone wrong. It's been absolutely perfect from start to finish. And that's down to Gary and Mac the Hat.
That's it. Lovely. Thanks for that, Alan. Before you go, I just want to say a couple more thank yous. Again, I want to stress our support for the Alzheimer's Society and also the change your life, put down your knife. We're big supporters of that as well. As I've previously said, if there's anybody that, as long as they give us enough notice, if they'd like us to advertise any particular charities or events, we'll gladly do that and try and advertise as much as we can via social media. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Sheet Roofing Limited. That's very much appreciated, but clearly the people we appreciate the most are the people that continue to view us, and leave comments and subscribe. But we wanted somebody real today, and we wanted somebody inspiring, and I think Alan certainly achieved that for us. And we'd like to wish him all the best. I look forward to working with him in the future, particularly next year. I find it a very exciting project. Very much looking forward to that. We didn't touch on the fact that Alan is a very firm supporter of the local football team where he grew up, which is
Fulham FC, the oldest professional club in London.
Yeah, I'll give you that. And
we're currently top of the table, top of the championship.
And I haven't said that our team, Mac the Hat and myself, Team Tottenham, we are also top of
the Prem. So there we are. It's a rare occasion.
Yes, I was going to say this will be very rare footage. Years to come, people will make reference to this. So, Alan, once again, thanks for coming.
Great pleasure, Frank. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks to Gary.
Lovely. All the best, mate. I wish you all the best. Lovely. Cheers.